All right, guys, welcome to our third meeting of the semester for Sports Analytics Club. This is not the interest meeting. I forgot to change that slide. Whoops. Picture on the field is from when we played South Florida. I know this Saturday didn't go so well for our football team, but it's okay. We got Furman this Saturday. We'll win that one. If you can, please use your phone to sign in with the QR code. It'll take you to the Google form, same as usual, name and email address. And then we will pull up the Kahoot to get started with our trivia. We'll give it a second. All right. If you didn't get the code, that's okay. We'll come back to that at the very end of our presentation as well. Yes. All right. So here's the code for Kahoot. If you've never played Kahoot before, go to the website kahoot.com and then type in the game pin and then a name or a nickname. And we'll get started with that when there's the right number of people. So there's 53 people minus 2 for me and Luke. Luke made the trivia this week. So we're about 45, 50. For those that are watching the recording later, the little box right here about where my mouse is the chat, so I can see it when we're talking. Sorry that blocks the screen. Hopefully that's a little bit better. All right, we have about 10 people or 8 people left or so. Anybody else trying to log in that can't log in? Type something in the chat real quick so we can know. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, looks like we're good to go. All right, question number 1. Who is the current NFL leader in passing touchdowns? Jameis Winston, New Orleans Saints. Question 2, what MLB team sits atop the NL Central Division? The Brewers, their low A affiliates right here in Zebulon. It's right on the other side of town from us at NC State. It's really cool. Who was the first team that Team USA beat in the World Cup qualifiers for soccer? Beat Honduras. Next one. Number 1 men's basketball recruit in the country, Shadon Sharp, committed to which team? Georgetown, Michigan State, Overtime Elite, or Kentucky? NBA Ignite is also not a correct answer. Part of the G League. Pretty funny, though. No, he's committed to Kentucky. Which player scored NC State's lone touchdown on Saturday? Thayer Thomas. Next one. Which former college football powerhouse lost on a Hail Mary this Saturday? They lost to Jacksonville State. I have a couple buddies on that team because they're from Alabama. So good times for them for sure. Florida State. So it's not looking great for the ACC this year. How much did Oregon get paid to travel to and beat Ohio State this weekend? Originally, it was supposed to be a home-and-home series. The front half in Eugene got canceled due to COVID. And so Ohio State had to pay Oregon $3.5 million. That's crazy to me. And they got the loss too, so even better. Next question, who is the NHL's all-time leader in wins by a goalie? All right. Next one, which 90s NBA legend stayed with the same team his entire career? John Stockton. And finally, a great segue, who won bronze in softball in the 2020 Olympics?
Got one right.
Don't you can't look at my picture. Don't look at my picture.
Yeah. Yes, that'll be Canada. Japan ended up winning on their home fields. They were super excited about that. US came in second place and Canada won the bronze. So on our podium, third place, Luke. Not the Luke that wrote the questions. Second place, Tucker. And first place, Abby. Good job. All right, so back to our slides. I can't click the button. There we go, finally. All right, so here's the sign-in form if you didn't get a chance to get that earlier. I'll let you grab one more second to grab that QR code. Awesome. Moving right along, we have a few announcements. So the NESIS is the New England Symposium on Statistics and Sports. That is a speaker series occurring in Fridays in October, so that's next month. It is virtual, so it is free, which is fantastic. You can check out the website when we send out the slides afterwards. The next conference that we want to talk about is the Yukon Sports Analytics Symposium. If you're competing in the poster contest, that is due October 1st. Otherwise, the competition, or not the competition. Otherwise, the actual symposium is October 9th. They have a couple of good speakers and tutorials coming up there. Price is $5. The link to the website will be sent out then as well. Finally, the Carnegie Mellon Sports Analytics Conference is November 6th and 7th. It's a Saturday, Sunday. Price is normally around $10, and this is normally one of the bigger, more academic sports analytics conferences that I know of. So this is a really good one. Opportunity I forgot to put on the slides is that the NFL Big Data Bowl is coming up, and they have their mentorship program starting up as well. I sent that out in the email earlier today, so hopefully you got the link towards that. It's a great opportunity to work with some people that are in sports. So next, I want to introduce our guest speakers, Stephen and Dan. Stephen is from SAS Canada, and he helped Team Canada and the softball team with some of their projects that they worked on for the Olympics this upcoming season. And then Dan has come to some of our meetings in the past. He's right here in Cary. So I absolutely want to turn it over to you guys. Thanks for coming.
And Billy, I'll just make a couple statements because I don't want to take too much time from Stephen. He is the superstar of today's show, and I'm here for more moral support. But any general questions about SAS's sports industry analytics effort, everyone can let me know. But for those who haven't been on previous calls, Dan Axman, I've been with SAS for about 2 years since serving the sports and entertainment industry for about the 25 prior years in different capacities with team sports, having worked for the Florida Marlins and Miami Dolphins at the time was Pro Player Stadium. I had gone through St. Thomas University's sports management program back in the mid-90s. And not growing in IT or technology in the early years, quickly segued into the early 2000s and really fell in love with the technology side of the industry. In the early years, spent most of the time around ticketing technology and fundraising technology, serving different markets throughout the sports industry, and then working on the technology side with smaller companies in both startup modes and a company or two that had been around for a while. But SAS is certainly by far the largest of the companies that I've worked with, obviously a global leader in advanced analytics and data and AI. And my role with the company is more on the partnership and business development side, where predominantly working a little bit more with collegiate athletics programs and introducing them to SAS, but helping to look for ways to help accelerate and grow a culture of analytics. Because as we know in university athletics, although there's some schools that do a little bit better than others, still in its infancy compared to pro sports and like organizations. And they're catching up quickly, especially with all these up and coming data scientists and folks like you. Not that sports will be the long-term career choice for all of you, but it is such a great way to learn about data and analytics, especially with all the open source data available out there. So a lot of data scientists in our company will talk to sports, whether they're sports enthusiasts or not, for those reasons. And I'd say any general questions that come up during the call, we certainly want it to be an interactive one. But Stephen, I'll let you take it away from here. You got a great story to tell and some success this year around the Olympics.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me. I'll introduce myself. My name is Stephen Ondrik. I'm from SAS Canada. The background behind me is originally from Calgary. That's where I was born. And that was from the 1988 Olympic Games. And so I'm a big Olympic fan, call me a pinhead because I love collecting Olympic pins. In my journey through retail, I started in retail. So I have my background in economics and mathematics, ended up moving to just outside of Toronto in a place called Hamilton, which is actually just down the road from where Wayne Gretzky was born. So for those who know the Great One, so he was in Brantford. That's about 30 minutes down the road to Hamilton. I joined SAS, and I've been with SAS for 15 years working on our retail practice. And just earlier this year, I was asked to help out with Team Canada, which was kind of a cool job for me because I'd never had a chance to work with Team Canada. So what I want to do is start with a presentation and just kind of walk through what we had done, and then please stop me anytime. This is supposed to be an interactive session, so I only have 8 or 10 slides, and I don't like to read slides, so that's just not the way I roll. So I will kind of talk around them because you guys can read. So we'll start with that. The one thing I'll try to get done is see if I can actually make my screen share, because I have always had my challenges with that from time to time. That's 2. Because which one's 1 and which one's 2? Because I have 2 monitors. That's always the challenge. Never happens, right, Dan?
Never. Just share the desktop. That's the silver bullet.
Exactly. And then we'll just figure out where we end up. So let's try slideshow. Okay, so you guys can see the presenter one or the other one? Which can you see?
We can see the presenter one.
Yeah, I hate that. Drives me nuts. How about that?
Better.
All right. Okay. Yes, I know. It's just one of those things, because if you use Teams, it's the other way. And if you use, one of those things.
Yeah.
So you already know who I am. So I wanted to kind of walk through the way that the questions were structured that you guys had sent me in a way that kind of dovetails into the story that we had for the Olympic Games. So the first thing is what's SAS Via? So SAS Via is the newest generation of the SAS product. It takes advantage of in-memory analytics, and it's fast. It is open source. It can support cloud. It can support software as a service. It really is the next generation of our software. So I don't want to go too much into SAS Via other than talking about this, because we could spend a whole 2 hours talking about what SAS Via is. It's a very exciting platform. The fact that, where I work in our retail environments, we can take models that come from R and Python, we can actually port them into our demand planning and price optimization solutions, and make the most of a customer experience. So we have data scientists that don't necessarily have to know SAS, which personally I think SAS is a good thing to know. But if you don't, we can consume that information. We can take that and we can make very complex decisions. So Team Canada and SAS. So back in 2017, there was a partnership that was forged between Team Canada and SAS. And going back to the screenshot that I had, is if we looked at 1988 in Calgary, that was the Winter Olympics there, Canada didn't win a gold medal. If we fast forward to Team Canada in 2010 in Vancouver, we won 33 gold medals. So a lot of that had to do with training, support, and analytics. And in 2017, we partnered with Team Canada to try to own the podium. So that's exactly what that meant, is how do we get Canada's athletes to perform better, but perform smarter? So one of the a few of the sports that we helped Team Canada with, as you can see, we've got women's softball, women's water polo, archery, and judo. So women's softball, we won a bronze, directly due to to do some of the analytics that we had to do, and I'll show you one of the dashboards that we had. In addition, I was brought on late, so I was not one of the ones that was in any way, shape, or form the architect of all of the success in Tokyo, but we were tasked with trying to keep Canada's athletes safe. So obviously, with the pandemic, the Delta variant, and all the different variants around, we wanted to make sure that we were keeping our athletes safe, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So when we started with the partnership with Team Canada, we had many disparate sports with many disparate data sources. So as you guys know, I mean, you were talking about football earlier. You talk about softball, just like baseball. We know every pitch. We know where everybody is. We know where the hit is. We know absolutely everything about it. Then you've got archery. What kind of data do you have? Score and an arrow. You don't have anything much more than that. So first thing is how do you store that data? So we ended up creating a data model based on an Olympic standard. It's called the Olympic Data Feed, and an XML to actually grab that data and put it into the database. So it's common, it's repeatable, structured, extensible. Then what we needed to do is figure out how to get that data into our database. Now, as some of you guys know, if you look at some of the scores, it's not like you can go and download all that stuff. Some of that's in PDFs, it's on websites, it's it's basically in some cases unstructured. So what we did is we created some Python scripts and use Scrappy, as you can see on the screen here, and we were able to take that data and scrape that data off and put it into our database. And as you can imagine, if you take, say, something like softball or you take hockey, it just the disparate version of how that data is stored is quite impressive. Again, we could spend an hour trying to figure out and show you how that data is stored, but the Olympic Committee and that group has actually done a very, very good job of making sure that data is structured. And again, when we took that data as anything that we could potentially extend it with that was being enriched even by the teams themselves, we could grab that. Now, when it came to Team Canada and COVID, that data obviously is not going to fit into an Olympic data feed. So that data was actually was taken from the Team Canada itself using test data and also using a questionnaire type of data. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So when we started taking the data to try to analyze it, every NSO, so that's a national sports organization, they have their own use for the data. So the interesting part is the folks on our team, and they're absolutely great. I mean, hats off to these guys. They basically took a business problem that they weren't necessarily experienced in solving. So for example, when you take softball or you take judo, I mean, you've got guys that know how to do data modeling. They know how to, we can do fraud, we can do all these different things. And they essentially had to learn how our national sports organizations were looking at their data. And the really interesting part was the national sports organizations were eager for us to help them, and they wanted to help us. So it was a win-win situation. So they were very, very good partners in terms of taking iterations of dashboards and, hey, does this make sense to you? Because this is what makes sense to me, but it doesn't necessarily make sense to you. And I want to show you this data in a certain way. So for example, I'm going to show you some custom widgets, and we've got some, we're using line charts. And line charts, for example, in archery, where you think of a line chart, you've got a number of points across time or across some sort of a abscissa that you can get a trend. Well, that doesn't make sense in something that's basically a discrete type of a score. So we basically looked at these things and came up with some really interesting ways to show that data to our customers, in this case, Team Canada. And here's an example. So for example, in softball, we actually have custom widgets that would render based on the data that was being presented to us. So for example, if you guys have ever used SAS Via, so that's on the Via platform, we can take enormous amounts of data and we can filter and sort, and we can run analytics on it. And for example, we could take take the softball data, and I wanted to show this to you. As you can see where the ball was crossing the plate and where it was hitting the strike zone, where the ball is being hitting into the outfield. And then if you look at something like archery, each one of these are stacked line charts because each arrow is one score. So we didn't want to take a trend necessarily over time. We wanted to see how did each arrow score. So we have two competitors here, and we can see as we get up to the I guess the back into the number of arrows that they had to shoot, that their accuracy starts to drop. We can see this definitely with the fellow from France, right? So these are the sorts of things that we try to help our athletes with, to see how are people performing over time. And then if we look at the water polo statistics, we did some modeling, and we could actually take competitions, and we would take competitions over time to say, hey, Canada and the US were competing. How did they perform? Oh, Romania and Turkey were competing. How did they perform? And we would get an idea of what the chances are of someone winning the match, and where were they putting the ball in water polo and such. And you can see we have an enormous amount of data for year competitions and then phases of these tournaments. And where I was involved was in the COVID-19 response. So the way that Team Canada looked at COVID-19 was an injury. For example, there was a number of athletes that did get sick, as athletes across the world did, and they had to self-isolate, or they got sick enough that they potentially had to be hospitalized, or they couldn't compete. So it was looked at as an injury. So what we did is we created some dashboards to say, is Team Canada at a greater risk, and those athletes at a greater risk than the general population, number one. Number two, are the types of training that they're doing, is it more risky than others? So for example, if we're training abroad versus domestically, or we're competing competing domestically versus internationally, because obviously there's some things that we can't, for example, if you're softball, to take an example, it's pretty hard to have a softball tournament with yourself, right? You just don't have that level of competition. So there's some of these things where we we try to assess that risk, and in some cases modify training regimens. So for example, taking things outdoors versus indoors. And I'm missing one here. Hold on. That's out of order. So these are this is the some of the sample of the dashboards that we had is, for example, training and competition domestically versus internationally. And is there any relationship to the number of COVID cases that we were getting? Are we doing screening? That sort of thing. So what we had to do is, and this is where I was involved a lot. It was interesting because you've got two disparate groups. You've got the NSOs themselves worried about their athletes, but then you've got the doctors. So the doctors look at things one way, the national sports organizations look at it another way. And what I ended up trying to do was create a buffet of dashboards to say, okay, these are the things that I think you want to look at. Tell me if this is what you want. And then take that and say, okay, so this is more of a medical type of a dashboard to say, okay, because I haven't shown it here, but hey, what type of tests we were doing? And I didn't even realize how many types of tests there are on the market and that were being used. And then you've got the types of things of who's training where and what are you doing? So you're training indoors, outdoors, or you could see in these things here where are you doing your testations? Are you training indoors, outdoors, or a combination and thereof? And I'll go back this way. And then finally, one of your questions was, what was it like to work with Team Canada? Absolute pleasure. I mean, in terms of clients, I mean, thinking of them as a client, absolutely the most collaborative people I'd ever worked with. They're very appreciative and they're very helpful because they wanted us to understand what they were trying to look for. And again, it was all the people that I worked with on our team said the same thing. It was just an amazing experience, and it was a learning experience for both of us on both sides. How SAS and SAS Via could help the athletes and the coaches and the doctors, and then what we'd learn about these sports. How are they looking and how are they looking at different things, and the type of things that made things important, especially for people that were working in banking and those sorts of things. They don't have that exposure to the sports, the sports statistics. It was really neat to be able to take that IP and leverage that with the different sports and across different sports, like I say, softball, judo, water polo. I mean, those, talk about different sports across. It was a really amazing journey with them. So with that, are there any questions? I wanted to keep it short and sweet. Now, please, absolutely ask questions.
Yeah, I'll start with the question. How was Team Canada as a client, like in terms of working with sports? Was it a high pressure situation? Like, oh, we need this by like tonight to have like a scouting report for tomorrow? Or was it more laid back as in, here's the dashboard, do with it as you please? Or how does that compare working like directly with a team as in being part of it, making daily scouting reports versus what SAS kind of did?
It depended on the situation. So for example, if we looked at, say, creating these dashboards, so you got to remember that with Team Canada, they had some of their own folks doing this, and they were using Excel spreadsheets and things like that. So anything that we could give them, I think they were quite patient about because we had the time. So for example, the stuff we did with softball, I mean, that had been in the works for almost a year, right? If not more. And, it really became, once we got everything agreed upon. So for example, the dashboard just that one little snippet, there was a whole bunch of visuals that were in that dashboard with a workflow. It was, oh, did you get that next competition loaded? So then it became, hey, they just competed on Saturday. Can you get that for us by Monday? So in that case, it became time sensitive, but the development, there was quite a bit of iterative back and forth. So they were very patient that way to get what they needed to the right way and to see it that way, if that makes sense. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. How hard was it to update the data into, or just add that new competition into the SAS Via?
So once we got the process done, so once we had the data model set up and we got the processes set up using the scrapers, my understanding it was quite easy. Like in my case, doing the COVID stuff, they just gave me the data manually, and I ended up using an old legacy product, EG, if you guys are familiar with that, Enterprise Guide. But the folks on the Team Canada side, they use the open source to get that into a standard format and load it. And it was really very, very easy to do. Once we had that set up, it was very repeatable because it was a matter of just loading the data from each of the sports into that data model. And the cool part about that data model is it was so extensible, and the tables, even though the sports were different, the certain what would you call it? The certain statistics could be stored in a standard way. There were some that didn't make sense, like if you got hockey and things like that. There's certain things that had to be extended from that perspective. But really, once it was set up, it was really, really pretty neat how it was done. Like I was blown away with some of the work that one of our consultants did. His name was Muzzamo, and he did an absolutely fantastic job. I was like, wow, looking like I was like totally blown away. Like, holy crap, you did a really good job of this. And it was so cool. He's like, yeah, just do this and this and this and this. And I'm like, whoa, slow down, slow down. What are you doing? So it was really cool. It was exciting. I get excited when I see it because the amount of work and the what would you call it? The determination to get this thing to work in a repeatable way was amazing.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else? If you don't want to come off mute, you can type your question in the chat and I'll read it out loud too.
I have one. How would you compare getting to work with Team Canada to other clients you've worked with in the past? Was it more like, was it similar? Like, was it more similar, more different than you were expecting? Kind of just what was it like?
Very good question, actually, because I've worked with lots of clients. I've been with SAS for 15 years, and I've worked with our retail clients. And it's not to say they were bad. There's no question there. It was different because I think it was I'm trying to think even how to say this. It was, we're both learning from each other as we went, and we were the experts in analytics. They were the experts in their sport, and it was kind of us leading them and them leading us. And it was really, really neat, because they didn't know what they didn't know and I didn't know what they didn't know, but it didn't matter because it was like, okay, I'm going to try this. Tell me what you think. Oh, yes, but can you do that? And then once we started that whole dialogue, it was amazing that way. And that's exactly what happened with the other, with softball and all that. So I would say in a lot of ways, it was a little more collaborative because I guess it's not about money at this point, right? It's not about being paid. It's about trying to help our athletes. And then I guess from that perspective, it was more of a kind of an altruistic kind of a thing where we just got a chance to kind of do whatever we needed to do, and it worked out quite well. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
I have a question. I was wondering if you're allowed to tell us any of the changes that Team Canada made, like as a result of the information they got from the dashboards you all made.
Good question. So I can tell you directly from the COVID stuff, because I wasn't privy to some of the things that happened with softball. I know there was, obviously, that the women's softball team won bronze because that was in your thing. That was directly, I think, correlated to some of the work we did. But in terms of the COVID protocols, if anything was seen, they would change training regimens and take things outdoors, or potentially look at it from a regional perspective. So there were some changes made. Fortunately, knock on wood, there wasn't really large outbreaks. I mean, if we looked at how Canada fared as a country, we actually escaped COVID quite a bit in a quite a bit better shape than in the US, to be frank. And our national team was even much more than that, because we had our national sports centers are scattered across the country. So we have some of our teams in BC, Alberta, we've got them in Quebec, in Ontario, and then in Nova Scotia for the most part. So we had them already siloed, but it allowed us to keep, to change those training regimens. I can say that from some of our other, like the other sports, I don't know the ins and outs, but for example, if we look at softball, I'll take that, knowing who was pitching where, when, at what point in the game, and how many outs there were. It allowed you to understand or expect what was going to be coming at you, if that helps. I didn't say it directly because I can't tell you all that, because there's some things I can't say, but I think you get the idea of some of the things that we were able to do for them. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Kind of piggybacking off that, did you find it different for different provinces? Like, were there differences between Quebec and BC and PEI and some of the other ones?
Well, thing is, each of the training centers, they're different. So that's it's kind of an apples and oranges thing. So if you look at, if you guys are familiar with Canada, I mean, Ontario, where I live now, is the most populous province, right? So about a third of our population lives in Ontario. And in fact, if you're familiar with like New York State, about 10 million people live between basically Niagara Falls all the way to Oshawa, and if you go across the lake, I think it'd be Rochester. So, we've got a very populous nation there, and we've got that. And then where the training centers are, because each of the training centers for sport are different. So if I take, say, our Winter Olympics, we've got a lot more concentrated out in Calgary, just because the Olympics were there, and then in Quebec. If we take some of our national summer sports, we've got them kind of smattered across all of those. So did we see much of a difference? I would say no, if you were to account for the type of sport and the population. It wasn't very high. I mean, definitely the positivity rates, I'll answer it this way. They certainly weren't 10 or 12%. They were a fraction, very much, very, very much a fraction of that, like definitely below our average as a population.
Awesome. That makes sense. Thank you. There's a question in the chat. Is SAS intending to keep working with Team Canada for the Winter Olympics? And if so, which sports? So that we can obviously scout and tell Team USA.
No. I love that. I right now, I don't know how far this is going to be extended, and I don't know what sports we will be involved with. Without mentioning any national sport, well, it's actually not even our national sport, but we are hoping to continue to work with them. But at this point, it's one of those things where there's a lot of things at play with the pandemic and stuff. But I hope we do, because the thing is, I had a lot of fun, and it'd be interesting to see what happens with that, because there's a lot of analytics that you can put together when you're putting together teams for different winter team sports.
Do you think they'll keep using the COVID dashboard that you guys created for the Winter Games as well?
Well, right now, I know they want us to keep doing it because the pandemic obviously is going to continue. How long that's going to continue, I don't know. I know that they definitely want to keep doing it, and I guess it's just a matter of how things evolve. As we know that this pandemic, nothing's written, so it's kind of, we're all kind of trying to feel our way out through this whole thing. And as we get more data, I think people are getting more comfortable, if that's the right word, to understand how this virus is going to evolve and affect performance. Again, it's affecting performance of all athletes. And again, I don't have that because I can't share it. But they treated COVID like an injury, because when you're sick, I mean, imagine getting a respiratory illness and you're a runner. I mean, you just can't compete. Some people are fine. They just get a bit of a cold, but then you get some people that get really, really ill, and there's a bit of lung damage, and they've got to recover from that. And there's been some significant, I've heard about that even just across from Team Canada and other athletes, where people have really had to take some time off and kind of recover from this virus.
This is another question. Dan, I think you can answer this one too. What other sports organizations / franchises are partners with SAS?
there's going to be probably a few that we're not supposed to mention, but we've done work with some of the leagues over the past few years, the NFL, Major League Baseball, collegiate athletic schools like Wisconsin, of course, NC State. We're very proud of some great work that we've done and continue to do. UNC, Chapel Hill, Memphis. And depending on, something I should mention here, I think, Stephen, that was phenomenal. There's some sound bites that I hadn't heard about this effort, but, depending on the level of expertise and where SAS and how SAS engages with our customers, especially in professional sports with the major league organizations, NFL, MLB, NBA, we may just provide and partner with them where we're deploying our software. And they have the data science expertise and the engineering and programming expertise. But one of the things SAS also does very, very well, and we certainly are doing this in collegiate athletics, is taking more of a holistic approach. So the services and the consulting and what can we do to accelerate the success that a customer would have, especially in year one or within the first few months. So I think Stephen's example here with Team Canada, especially the fact they were working with spreadsheets, distinguishes where we would come in and create those initial dashboards, start to show those visualizations, and then in some cases the customers may take over. But to get back to the immediate question, I was kind of looking down our roster across Europe to give you a few there. British Rowing has been a partner of SAS for a while, although I am not a huge rowing fan. And ironically, in this Olympics, I don't think they fared as well as normal, but I think that was more, from what I read into, more about a major changeover from, the past elite rowers that they had kind of aging out, and some of the newer, younger incoming rowers across the board. Royal Belgium Football, one of the larger soccer or football, European football organizations. So I think we have worked across the full gamut of professional sports and now making more inroads into collegiate athletics. I think we had a good story. Sam Edgman, one of our data scientists, told about the Boston Bruins. This one was more public, where he had actually worked with them directly going back a few years ago, and they had one of the worst shooting and scoring percentages in the NHL in the couple of years leading up to that. And, at their time, their president, Cam Neely, for anybody, I'm dating myself here, but for anybody that knows him, he was one of those bruisers. He'd throw some punches, he'd get very physical in his style of play. And he believed that the team should have players like him. He wanted bigger, stronger players. And their GM kind of won the battle, and he felt that they needed, quicker players and really work on what they could do around recruiting, those better shooters and scorers. And over the course of the couple of years that we were working with them on that effort, and Sam was actually a big part of that project, the story he tells is, they certainly did what they were hoping to do in getting to the Stanley Cup, but unfortunately they went up against a hot goaltender in St. Louis and there wasn't much they could do there. But I think it was one of those Moneyball-like stories, not that the focus of the story was around what they were paying for the players, but, what type of player contributes to the team in the way that they are looking to perform, and using data and analytics to help augment those decisions.
One of the cool things I find about SAS in the terms of sports analytics is it's not directly just the stuff on the field. So Stephen talked about working with the COVID dashboards, or as Dan has told us in other meetings, they've worked with the business side of the sports as well. So there's lots of different avenues, just kind of as a general thought, where you can apply sports analytics or just analytics in general. So just want to put that out there.
And I agree, Billy. I mean, that's just what to say that is analytics can be used anywhere. Is it putting together a team, as Dan said, or, for example, if you're a bobsleigh, you're running bobsleigh, the push off is the biggest thing. So could you run analytics to say that 4 seconds of push off is where you get your start. Can it be used anywhere? Yes, it can, as long as you can capture the data. And that's the beauty of SAS. It can capture pretty much any data you can throw at it. It could be unstructured, it doesn't matter. As long as you have data, SAS will consume it.
Absolutely. All right. So another question. What made Team Canada decide to partner with SAS for only softball, water polo, and judo, but not other sports?
It really was a bandwidth thing, because there was, SAS Canada is a smaller kind of branch of SAS. There would be more that they would ask to take on, but it's just one of those journeys that you can't build Rome in a day type of thing. So it was the places that they thought they could, I guess, use the most help and get the most benefit. And as you can see, women's softball, the first time they'd won bronze. So again, could they all use it? Of course. It's just one of those things where you can't bite off everything. Like, how many sports are there? If you think between summer and winter, because we've done some winter work with our athletes. It's just a matter of how long is a piece of string? You just can't do everything all together.
All right, another question. This is a little bit longer. The sports statistics often have to be scrapped or repurposed for different scenarios. For example, if Canada was expecting to play Team A in a tournament, but instead match up with Team B, did data about Team A get repurposed elsewhere?
The way that we looked at it is we scraped the data after the competition happened. So there was not an issue about rescheduling, because it was always done after the fact. And then any modeling and predictive analytics was pushed forward. So we didn't have to worry so much about that, because it wasn't necessarily real time. They weren't really looking for that. I think one of the worries is, if you try to get it real time, is will you get it right? I think what you're trying to do is over the longer term. So if you look at softball, there was analysis over tournaments over the last few years across all the teams, and it was getting a general idea of what was going to happen with our team, with our team and other teams. It wasn't just about Team Canada; it was about who's doing what where. So we didn't have that, I guess, just in time worry. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think another part of this question was talking about reusing data for different reasons. So if we had data testing in one spot versus another spot, or data that was, or some kind of idea used for one sport used in another sport, if you could talk about that, I think that also answers the other part of that question.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of, I guess, yeah, so I understand kind of. So in terms of the Olympic data model, the data model was standard, so we could capture the data for disparate sports. So that was kind of that first piece. So we didn't have to redo anything. And in terms of looking at that, the data by competition, as long as the competition happened, it was always being used in the model. So it was never about throwing away the data. Now, if the competition never happened, that's a different story, because then that's not something you can analyze. So we were always looking at stuff that did actually happen retrospectively. So I think I answered your question there, because we would, like, for example, if Canada was playing Mexico and then Canada was playing the US, well, if Canada never played Mexico, then we wouldn't worry about what Mexico did, because Mexico didn't play Canada. If Mexico played somebody else, of course, we grab that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if you could type in the chat, whoever that was, Ian, if that helped, it does. Awesome.
Perfect. Sorry, because I can't see the chat. So thank
you. All good. Anybody else? Good questions, guys and girls.
Here's one that's a little less maybe statistical, I guess, and more like personal. Of the couple events that you worked on, which one would you say was your favorite?
Well, I didn't get a chance to work so much on the other events because I was brought in kind of late to the party, so to speak, for COVID. But I have to say that if I look at what we did with our softball team and our custom widgets, because SAS Via, we've got objects. So for example, you've got these, I'm going to call them boring. Like, you've got a line chart, it's kind of boring. You got a bar chart, it's kind of boring. when I showed you the picture of the softball plate and things like that, SAS Via has the ability to, if we create that widget, it can create a call and bring that object back with the data that we need. So for example, I think that is going to be really cool. Like if I look at our retail products, there may be something that I want to look at. Hey, potentially, I'll make up an example, a shelf. I want to see I want a shelf that's 8 feet high and I've got 4 shelves in it, and I want to see the distribution of products by price. Well, now, would that ever be cool? Because I wouldn't, because we've never been able to do that sort of stuff before. And imagine being able to do that, saying, okay, I want to do this by product category. So that's the sort of things that we can do with VA. In this case, with softball, we were able to do this by competition, and we were able to do it by year and by team. And it didn't even have to be Team Canada. It was like, this team is playing this team. What is Mexico doing? What is Japan doing? And it's amazing some of the stuff that you're able to tease and put it in a way that is meaningful to the user. So for example, the plate, for example, you'd see, if you watch the baseball games now, they've got that batter's box. Well, we have heat maps. We did heat maps to actually show where the pitches are being done. And the fact that we're able to do that, it allows teams to look at, oh, okay, at this part of the game, look for something like a low slider, right? That's pretty cool. This is this pitcher where the bottom of the ninth, yeah, they tend to throw a slider. That is so cool. So that I think that part really makes, looking on the outside in to say, wow, you can really do that. And actually analytics will help. And it did. It helped our women's softball team, because they got to know the team without actually even playing them. They get to play them, but they don't get to play them every time, right? So you get to know your team and your opponent, in ways you've never been able to see before. So imagine taking that for NFL football, right? You only get to play a team. Sometimes you don't get to play a team in the season, but imagine knowing everything that the Bucks did over the last, maybe changed because you get a different quarterback, but imagine being able to say over the last, say 8 or 12 games, this is what they do. That's kind of the really cool stuff that you can do with analytics and with SAS.
I have a follow-up question to that. Did you ever use data from games that weren't in the Olympics? Like if college softball players were going to be on the Olympic team, did you use data from those games?
We only did it for the teams that were in there. So we didn't use just Olympic data. So for example, if you take water polo or softball, those teams compete all like use soccer, for example, they're competing all the way through until the Olympics happen. Same thing with softball and water polo. We took it as teams. So we wouldn't take individual players and try to integrate that into the analytics, but we would take the team. So if the team has played over the last few years, we would take all their competitions and we would do that the same. We would do the same thing for the other teams. How do they compete over the last couple of years? Those types of sports, they tend to stick together. If you look at those types of things, when you get into the individual sports, same thing. If you look at judo and things like that, they have, I guess, standard and sanctioned competitions, and those are the sorts of things that we can capture data for. Because if there was competitions we didn't have data for, we could never do anything with it. But most of these types of sports, they have a sanctioned competition, and then they publish those, the statistics for that.
Got it. Thank you.
No problem.
I have a question about kind of following how you just answered that if you do the team statistics instead of the individuals, say there's a new softball coach for Mexico, and they got the coach right before the Olympics. How would you go about doing Mexico's data? Would you just say this is what their old one was, kind of put it in the back pocket, but we have to see how they play with this new coach and see what happens, or how would you do that?
That's a really good question. That part I'd have to take back and find it if we went to that level, because we did look at who's the batter, who's the pitcher type of thing. Did we go to the level of a coach? I don't know if that was done, but did that play out in the models? It likely did. So for example, if we looked at, how people were hitting, we might not have had a variable that was thrown in to say we had, this coach, now we have this coach. But my guess would be is we would have something would show up on the model. But that's something I can take away. Let me write that down because I will forget. Because I will ask if we went to that level. I don't believe we did, but I'll ask.
Thank you. Yeah, I know that like some coaches, they'll bring in like certain pitchers like in certain situations because they trust them more. And like if a new coach got thrown in there, maybe they like have like different pitchers that they bring in, and it would kind of maybe that slider that you're expecting doesn't get thrown, and maybe it's a fastball or something. But
Absolutely, totally, yeah, totally get what you're saying, because it's just like I love my CFL football, and you get a change in coach, and even a quarterback. You get a quarterback that likes to throw to receiver, right? And for whatever reason, someone gets injured, and all of a sudden the whole game changes because now you have a different receiver, and there's it's just a different feel. So I totally get it. I will take that one away, and I think I get that. So basically, if you're just to make sure I understand this, a coaching change changes the dynamics of the team, and is that accounted for?
yeah, that's what I was asking you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I will ask. I don't know if I can answer that, but I will take it away and see if I can, and I will take it back. I think to you, Billy, would I take it back to you?
That's perfect, and I can send it to Jordan or the whole club or whoever wants to answer. For sure.
Absolutely. I think that's a good question to ask, because hey, it happens, right? I mean, you get the same thing with NFL football. The coach changes and all of a sudden you got a different team. Right?
Especially for softball and baseball. I mean, compared the style of baseball between Team USA and Japan, the reason Team USA baseball lost the first time against Japan is because the extra innings rule, Japan laid out a bunt, and the US just does not do that as a team in general. So definitely something to take into account, coaches.
Yep, absolutely. And that's a very good point. So I'll ask and see if that was in there. I don't know if it was that detailed, but the models may flesh it out. Then again, if you get a short-term coaching change, like for example, if it's happened two games before the Olympics, it's pretty hard to grab that information, because you have to grab that data. And I think that's the main thing, is where do you get that? Even though it may not necessarily be structured, it's unstructured, but it's structured. Where are those statistics captured, right? Because then you have to kind of parse that information from the coach, from the team, right? Because now you're dealing with, is that coach? Oh, they did college softball. Okay, I had this dynamic and this group of people. How do you get the analytics to say, oh, I like to have pitchers that do this, and I like somebody that can hit the ball like this? That starts to get into some really cool stuff, actually, to be honest with you, if you can capture that data. But again, I'll take that away. That's a great question, Jordan.
Awesome. So on that note, that's probably going to be our last one that we have time for. So again, Stephen, David, or Dan, thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed it. So I hope everybody else did too. If you're still on the chat, make sure to fill out the Google form for the attendance if you haven't already. That's just so that we can get a number of who's coming. Our next meeting is going to be next week. To be determined if it's going to be in person or not. I'm going to look into that and see if we can make it in person. We're going to do our next tutorial in the programming language of R that we kind of started about 2 weeks ago. So stay on the lookout for emails for that. With that being said, that's it. So I will see you guys next time.